was George Karl on the show yesterday. Stephen A., you didn't have a chance to react to any of Karl's comments when he was explaining that he made in his book. What is your reaction to what he was saying on the show?
My reaction to it is that I understand where he's coming from the perspective of his own experiences, which he has been open about, and I applaud him for that. But it doesn't make him any less wrong about what he said about Carmelo Anthony and what he said about Kenyon Martin. And he talked about how he said something over a course of a few pages, but the book's over 250 pages. If you read the whole book, et cetera, et cetera. There's certain lines that you simply know not to cross. And there's certain lines where you know when you cross them, nothing else you say actually matters. You know, you can talk about, George Karl has every right to talk about Carmelo Anthony as a basketball player. You coached him, you know. And if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I don't care how critical he was about Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony played for this man for years. Helped him win 77% of his games in Denver, mind you, but nevertheless, and get to Western Conference Finals. But nevertheless, again, he has every right to judge Carmelo Anthony as a player. When you get into the personal route, you go a bit too far. And where it became worse for George Karl, whether it was Melo, whether it was Kenyon, whether it was J.R. Smith and others, all of them came out in unison and literally either dismissed it by not commenting on it in the case of Carmelo and taking the high road, or in the case of others, call Karl a miserable human being. It wasn't for his comments. It was because of who they believe him to be. Now, as a reporter, George Karl's a dream because he's going to say what it is that he feels, and he's, for the most part, he's very, very candid. And it's a struggle for him to internalize and hold his thoughts, Max. But at the same time, they would be quick to tell you whether it's treatment of players, whether it's trading of players, whether it's coaching players, whether it's decisions you made, whether it was you being upset because you wanted to be the Greg Popovich of the Denver Nuggets and you wanted a similar contract and you wanted control and you didn't want AI and you told Chauncey Billups to his face that you didn't need him and all of this other stuff. There were an abundance of things that you could look at George Karl and point to him not just as a coach, but as a person, and essentially excoriate him. Younger individuals who are not the grown man that the 64-year-old George Karl is, knew to refrain from such things and to avoid getting at him that way. How does he come across as more petulant than individuals that he was assigned to lead? Still shocks the mind. And he could explain it till the cows come home. He and I exchanged phone messages because we missed each other over the phone, Max, and he tried to explain himself. He thought, you know, he didn't try to explain himself. He disagreed with me. He said that he felt that he was right on the money, but he respected where I'm coming from. I told him I respect his coaching record as well, but I thought there was a line he crossed then, and he did nothing yesterday to dissuade my opinion.
Yeah, my question with George Karl, and I asked him yesterday, is, you know,
great.
Sports books have added a lot to our understanding of the sports world behind the scenes, and they're valuable in that way culturally, I think. However, there's a trade-off. Those who write those kinds of books, the kiss and tell books, and those are the kinds of books that the publishers are interested in talking to the guys' agents about making because they'll sell, particularly someone like George Karl who has access to media outlets, you know, where you can sell the book and it may cause some controversy. You have to ask the guy to violate someone's trust and to make these private moments or these moments that were implicitly, you know, private, people just assumed they were private, public. And how does he reconcile that with himself? His answer was, well, over time, a certain amount of time passes, and I just want to make observations and comment about my experience. Now, the way these books are generally written is he sits there, George Karl in this instance, or someone else in another, with a writer who has a recording device, and they talk. And they talk a lot, and then the writer transcribes it, and then he works it into some kind of a narrative that makes some sense. But at that point, it goes into editing. Ostensibly, George Karl gets to read it and think if he likes it or not. It goes into proofreading. Like, there's a whole process. This is not just a radio interview where George Karl may have said something off the cuff that he later regrets. If there are 5 or 10 or 15 pages of stuff that he regrets in a book, well, there was plenty of time to vet all that stuff before. It's much harder to make the argument that, well, it just kind of slipped out. It wasn't extemporaneous talking he was doing. I mean, originally it may have been, but through the process, He gets to see it, read it, reread it, edit it, etc. And yet it still came out in this way. And that is a bad look, at least if he's saying he didn't really mean it or he's now thought better of it. If, however, he says, look, I know this is going to hurt some feelings, ruffle some feathers. It may not be a scholarly work, but these are my observations and my kind of feelings about it. And yes, I guess I violated some people's trust, but I thought in the sense of the greater good, it was worth doing. Okay, that's an argument I can buy.
Well, let's take into account, I get where you're coming from, but we also have to take into account who we're talking about here. We're talking about an individuals that players felt the need to attack because why? It wasn't just because of what he said in the book. It's because it was indicative of something that they knew about this man. George Karl is somebody, for example, DeMarcus Cousins didn't have as much of a problem with George Karl feeling the way he felt about him, more so than DeMarcus Cousins had a problem with the fact that he would find out about it through various media reports because again, you didn't feel the need to be honest with him and tell the guy to his face. Those kind of things. The NBA, we have you know, what was it, HGH issue or whatever the case be. You make money for years off of the backs of the NBA. You rave about the league, and then you wait until you're gone and you start talking about stuff that's relatively unsubstantiated, which disappointed the commissioner, disappointed other teams, players, etc., etc. It's almost like you don't care about how you sully the very brand that you've lived off of for decades. And that's not the George Karl that I ever expected to see at this particular moment in time. I respect the hell out of the man as a coach, but how he's conducted himself with this book, I don't appreciate it.
I'm with you. I'd rather have the trust than the sales any day. Live by the Godfather. Never tell anyone outside the family what you're thinking. Don Corleone, very wise man. Des Bryant was extremely upset the last time the Cowboys faced the Packers in the playoffs. Will he get to make up for it this time?